Look at that Christmas beauty. Merry Christmas, everyone. We made it. And thank you so much for tuning in to this special holiday edition of Outnumbered. I'm Kennedy, and joining us today, we have Carly Shimkus, Fox & Friends first co-host, Rebecca Heinrichs, Hudson Institute Senior Fellow, Lisa Booth, Fox News political analyst, and the doctor is in, Dr. Mark Siegel, Fox News Senior Medical Analyst, Professor of Medicine at NYU Langone Health, and author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, The Miracles Among Us, How God's Grace Plays a Role in Healing. All right, now for the first time in decades, Gen Z is leading a resurgence in church attendance. According to Christianity Today, the religious reawakening suggests a growing trend that began in the aftermath of COVID, where these kids were marked by a hunger for deeper meaning and a desire for concrete answers to life's biggest questions. And new data bears this out. Gen Zers who go to church are more frequent attendees than churchgoers from older generations. 24% of Gen Zers go to church every week, a slightly higher rate than millennials and Gen Xers. President Trump has taken note of those leading the revival, giving praise to them during this year's presidential turkey pardon. Watch.
We have more people praying. The churches are coming back. I don't know if you've been reading that story, but religion is coming back to America.
Some might say the spike in religious revival happened in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. Charlie, as you know, helped many young people find their purpose. He spent years doing outreach about faith, family, values, and, of course, our country and patriotism. Pastors have even seen non-believers picking up a Bible for the very first time, dubbing it the Charlie Kirk effect. The CEO of Hallow, an app for daily prayer, telling Outnumbered, quote, "In the 7 days following Charlie's death, we've seen a 95% increase in new folks coming to the app to pray." So, Dr. Siegel, I will start with you. You have been writing about this. You have been researching this. What is it about this younger generation is leading them to a faith that many had assumed they had forgotten?
I thought about this a lot when I wrote my book. I think it's all the divisiveness of our times. I think it's the political aspect of everything, the anger, the rage. People are looking for another way. And miracles plays a part of this. You know, the patron saint Carlo Acutis just was made a saint in September by Pope Francis at the time. He's called the patron saint of the internet. His two miracles, first was a Brazilian boy who had a pancreatic defect. Second was a woman in Costa Rica where the mother prayed at his grave, and she was cured of an amazing head injury. That was so inspirational to young people everywhere, Carlo Acutis. That plus Charlie Kirk. I mean, Charlie Kirk's death galvanized young people on the right, and Erica Kirk's, as a role model, has done that. But I think it was waiting to happen, because people want to believe in faith, they want to believe in religion, they want to believe in miracles. It makes their lives have meaning.
Yeah, it really does. And it's interesting because everyone assumes they know Gen Zers. They assume they know their motivations, they assume they know the outcomes of how they've been raised. But a lot of people didn't see that a generation of young people who were raised in front of screens would actually move towards something with deeper meaning that they weren't getting from social media. How do you see it?
It's so true. Well, this is a very positive development, and it is surprising because this is a time where usually when you think about trends in young people, it's always negative. But somehow this bright light has shone through. And you know, I think that naturally people wonder why. It's cause and effect. What has caused this effect of people becoming closer to God? And a lot of people do point to Charlie Kirk and social isolation because of COVID, social isolation because of social media. And all of those things may be true, but I think the greater reason is God simply using those things to intervene in young people's lives, because that's what God does. He looks for lost people, and a lot of young people feel lost right now. So I think that that is the core reason why this is happening. I mean, if you think about those negative things that are impacting a lot of young people, the response to negativity can oftentimes be more negativity. But in this generation, in this instance, the pendulum has seemed to swung in the opposite direction, which is such a beautiful and wonderful thing. And if that doesn't give you hope in the youth of America right now, and really around the world, I don't know what does.
All right, so what about politics? Because the New York Times is taking the same data that we're seeing, and you know, they're skewing it as somehow negative because there is a political tie with a lot of younger people who were moved by Charlie Kirk's movement when he was alive and in the aftermath of his assassination. Do you think that it is tied to politics?
Well,
the
I
resurgence
think
in faith?
I would say politics is more tied to religion in the sense that for most people, religion can be the base level of your political beliefs, right? You know, for Charlie, it was, right? His belief in God was his foundation for what he believed politically speaking. So I would view that as a positive. And to Carly's point, yeah, I think you just have so many young people really searching for purpose in this life when society and the people in charge, they keep trying to knock down the pillars of truth and the things that give people meaning, whether it be faith or family either. You know, and you look at that sense of, you know, the desire for purpose, and what better answer than the Bible and then in the instruction to live life like Jesus Christ, right? Who came here not to be served, but to serve and gave his life for all of us. I mean, that's the most selfless thing you can do. And even if you're not a Christian, you look at what the Bible tells us to do, to forgive your enemies, right? To have faith, to not be self-centered, to be giving, to show love, compassion, hope, right? All of these things that make us better people, make us a better society. And also, I think looking above and looking at something bigger than yourself allows us to stop looking inward, which would be healthy for everyone in society. So I think this is a really beautiful thing. And the last thing I'll note is attending church 24% every single week. That means it's not a fleeting thing either. Like, that's a real thing to be there every single week. So it's beautiful, in my opinion.
That is an absolute commitment. But I love what you said about searching for something greater. Because so much of, as you know, we're talking about, so much of what people assume about younger generation is they're only interested in themselves. And that's what social media does. It's just a constant mirror where you're walking around looking at your own reflection. But it's nice to know that you've got a generation, Gen Zers are more likely to attend church regularly than even baby boomers. Like the attendance actually goes down with successive generations.
That's right. And I want to pull on this thread about what social media does, because I think, again, this is the generation during COVID, during lockdowns, a lot of them became hooked on social media. It was ubiquitous technology. A lot of people weren't around each other. They were missing that part with having real relationships, and they became absorbed with themselves. That's what social media does. And then you had identity politics that divides everybody up according to various identities, very inward looking. And this sort of worship of self is not satisfying. It's extremely not satisfying. So I think then you start to have people looking, well, what is lasting? What is real? What is objective? And what can unite us? And look at these thousands-year-old faiths, the Bible. These are truths that are objective and outside of us, much more satisfying. And then, as you pointed out, going to church every single week and not just a couple times a year, you're going to have more lasting attendance there too. And last point, Charlie said what he wanted to be remembered by. It wasn't politics. It was contending for the faith, courage in the faith. And I think that that's been very impressionable on young people.
Kennedy, Carly's point is really interesting, because I found this too when I was studying this in my book, which is that God comes around and chooses the miracles he wants to choose. That's her point, that God is entering the world now and saying, I don't like what's happening, and he causes miracles. But then the miracles are contagious. They're infectious. People see them and they're inspired by them, and that's the antidote to social media.
Yeah, and I would say the same for faith and prayer as well. It is wonderfully infectious and a nice way to certainly start our show and, really meditate on the holiday.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.